Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to another episode of Kalam Space Podcast. Kalam Space Podcast is a platform where we invite inspiring creatives and professionals to share some insights of their expertise and how do they navigate their work in such a way that it benefits them not just for this dunya, rather for the next as well. I'm your host Azim and your co-host
Imran. Yeah, and today we have something special for you guys.
Oh really? You're looking very nice, by the way.
Thank you.
Mashallah, very chic. You're very happy.
I am happy.
Why are you so
I'm very
happy?
excited because it's my first guest.
Oh,
we have
mashallah.
something very exciting
Mashallah.
for the audience. Today, for you guys, we have a multi-award winning British artist and calligrapher here with us,
Mashallah.
Mr. Ruh Al-Alam.
Mashallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Welcome, brother. Welcome. We hope that you are feeling comfortable and relaxed in our.
Thank you so much for
I
inviting
mean,
me.
we had a long chat after. Just for perspective, we had a long discussion before this. We had a lot of fun, and now we are on the camera.
Yeah.
Inshallah.
Yeah, no, thank you so much.
Welcome. So, we just had a quick introduction for yourself, and just really wanted to get to know you, Mr. Ruh Al-Alam, and kind of like, where were you born in the UK?
Yes, born in London,
Okay.
born and bred. Lived most of my life there until I travelled later on. But yeah, English, British, if you will.
But ancestrally, you are.
Originally Bangladeshi. So my
Mashallah.
parents came from Bangladesh in the 60s,
Yeah.
and then sort of all the few generations of us in now. So
So you are the second
second
generation.
I believe, yeah.
So we're very British in that sense. Do you find yourself calling yourself a British more than a?
Yeah, no,
Bengali?
I think culturally we're British, if
Okay.
you will. So I personally didn't really grow up with much
Okay.
sort of Bangladeshi culture, if you will. So most of my life was sort of everything British culturally,
Okay.
and then obviously a very Muslim household.
Yes,
so
that's true.
upbringing.
Even
Alhamdulillah.
food as well.
Oh no, the food was
The most important
Proper.
question.
Bangladeshi cuisine is
Yeah.
on par, So
Yeah.
that's one thing that we
really retain in some
yeah,
sense.
absolutely. Well, we gave to the English and the British really a lot of the
some masalas.
absolutely. Yeah.
Mashallah.
And it's a national dish of England, isn't
Yeah.
it? Britain is an Indian dish.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
So I mean, the discussion that we had kind of like we came to know. I mean, you grew up in London, in proper London.
that's right.
How was it really growing up in London? As I mean, I don't want to disclose your age here, but it was in the 80s.
Yes, in the early 80s.
In the early.
Yeah, absolutely.
How was it like?
London growing up? I mean, look, there were different parts of London.
Yeah.
And so there were some troubling times as well for people of ethnic minorities, and there was some sort of racism and gang warfare and so on.
Yeah.
But London is a diverse place, and so there's always been a movement of people that were coming in and going out, and so it's just you didn't feel a lot of the racism a lot of the time because you were such a diverse
Okay.
place, and so that always gave you a sort of an international vibe
Okay.
to a degree.
Even at that time in the 80s, was it already very multicultural?
I mean, yeah, it was already quite multicultural. There
Okay.
was a lot of diaspora as well
Yeah,
as
yeah.
people from the Caribbean,
Yes.
from former colonies of the British
Okay.
as well. So
Yeah.
London's just a big
Yeah.
place where everyone mixes,
Yeah,
and so it's a great place to sort of grow up with a diverse range of people that you'll meet every day.
Mashallah.
Yeah.
Mashallah.
I'd say very similar to like Melbourne, like in Australia.
Yeah.
Very multicultural. A lot of the
Yeah.
culture that comes into the country is actually from elsewhere. It's not really.
But would you say Melbourne is more, or? I mean,
Well, I've
you
never been to London. So.
I mean, you've been to Melbourne.
I've not been to Australia at all.
Oh, you've never
really?
been?
Yeah, I mean, don't
Okay.
tell Peter. He always asks me to, to
Did you say yeah?
look, he's like, you haven't come yet.
Yeah.
Seriously.
He's from Sydney, I think.
He's from Sydney, yeah. So, but look,
Yeah.
the thing is, when you grow up in somewhere like London,
Yeah.
I'm sure it's similar to Sydney and Melbourne,
Yeah.
is that when sometimes you go out of those cities,
Yeah.
when then there's more of a dominant
Okay.
native
Yeah.
populace,
Yeah.
you then realize, oh, actually it feels unusual and uncomfortable even because you're not used to,
Yes.
the lack of diversity, if you will.
Yeah, especially when you go like camping and stuff.
Yeah.
When you go camping, you go to the regional areas. It's just dominated by the natives. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, it just felt for so long for a lot of people that they felt out of place.
Yeah.
So there's like a group of brown people hiking,
Yeah.
or camping, as you said, right?
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
it was one, you couldn't see yourself doing those things initially, but when you
Yeah.
started doing those things,
Yeah.
you still felt a bit self-conscious about doing it.
Mm.
But it's fairly normal now. You've got all
Yeah.
sorts of people doing all sorts of stuff. So
Yeah.
I don't know what the
Yeah.
inhibitions were for people, but really, but it's changed. Things have moved on.
Inshallah. So you had did you go to a international school, or was it a madrasa, a standard madrasa, or a public school?
It was just a regular school,
Okay.
so like a state-funded school.
A public school.
Public schools. I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, public schools in the UK are actually private schools. It's a bit weird,
Okay.
right? So consider it like basically a state-funded
Okay.
school.
Okay.
But I was in a highly concentrated, Bangladeshi area.
Okay.
And so there was a high number of Bangladeshis. So
Okay.
there wasn't that much
So
diversity.
even if it's a public school, it's basically
yeah, I mean,
it's dominated by. Yeah.
but anybody could
Yeah.
go. So anyone in the locality.
Okay.
But there was a high percentage of Bangladeshis in the first couple of schools I was in.
Okay.
But then as soon as I went into sort of
Yeah.
what do you call it, college, which
Yeah.
we call it's like 16 to about
Yeah.
18. It was 2 years college, then it's university. And that's when there was a much bigger diversity of people.
Okay.
But growing up, even in the area, there was a range of people that you'd meet and
Yeah.
make friends with. And I've always wanted to keep an international cohort of friends anyway. And so I was always fascinated by other people's cultures all the time.
Okay.
There was a Moroccan guy, or there was
Yeah.
this Greek person or that person. And I was like, I was fascinated by what they were doing, how they lived their lives, how different it was from mine,
Yeah.
learning where they're from. And so as soon as I got a chance to travel, I traveled.
Yeah, mashallah. So, I mean, obviously, you're a calligrapher now. When did it actually happen? Did it happen when you were in school?
No, actually,
Yeah.
I wasn't. Throughout, since a young age, I was focused on art of some sort.
Okay,
And
yeah.
so I liked drawing or
Yeah.
painting or whatever.
So you were in the. So I'm not sure whether the UK education system is like that. Do you go into art stream, like science stream kind of thing? Do
So
you have to
you-
make that change? Like,
Well, I mean, it may have changed now, but
Yeah.
the way it was that you did almost everything,
okay,
right? So for a very long time, until about sort of 14
Mhm.
to 16. So 14, you can sort of focus on a few things, but generally up till 16, you were doing everything, right? So
Okay.
almost all subjects, right?
Okay.
And so everyone had to do art, and everyone had
Yeah.
to do,
Yeah.
maths and science
Yeah.
English and whatnot. I did all of those things, and
Okay.
I enjoyed doing all of them. And while I was good at art, I was still also focused on the other subjects.
Yeah.
But come college, what we call the sort
Yeah.
of 2-year college that we
Yeah.
call in the UK,
Yeah.
I felt that there was a sort of a motivation for a lot of people to go into the sciences or
Okay.
something like that, kind of the typical. Then I applied to this one college.
Mm.
I applied to sciences and a few others,
Yeah.
but there's just one college I applied to for what we call the A-levels at the time,
Yeah.
and I decided to just go with the arts, right?
So it
back in the
happened.
trend.
It happened then, not earlier. Like kind of like that passion for.
Yeah, no, I had the passion.
Okay, okay, it was there
Okay,
already.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no,
Okay,
I was doing it since I was a kid. My dad used to be like, you just
Okay.
draw everywhere, on the walls, on the doors, and he goes, I knew when you started drawing
Okay.
the flower was one panel of the door, and you started copying it on the other one
Oh,
when you were a kid, and that's when I knew that you
had something.
You had something in your thing,
Yeah.
in your sort of you wanted to do.
Yeah.
And so I would scribble and draw. So it was all these cartoon characters and
Okay.
whatever I
Okay.
saw on TV, I'd be like trying to draw them and so on.
Mm.
And then, so I always knew I enjoyed doing arts, and it came
Mm.
sort of naturally.
Yeah.
But then I also wanted to be good at sciences and other areas, and so I
Yeah.
did well in those other areas as well. But because I didn't want to be like, oh, the failing artist or something later on.
Yeah.
But it was in my,
Yeah.
in my locker, as it were.
Okay.
But then I said, oh, you know what? I'm just going to go ahead and do what I want when I focus on the college. But I kind of knew that I wanted to do design.
Okay.
In particular, by the time I was 13.
Mm.
And so I actually...
At a very young age, 13
very
years old.
young, yeah. So I actually got the prospectus for the university
Okay.
at 13 for the course I think I wanted to do, right?
Which was.
Bachelor of Graphic Design, Bachelor of
Okay.
Graphic Design at
Yeah.
Central St. Martin's. A very specific university in the UK.
That specializes on
They
arts?
they're an art college, famous
Okay.
art college, but the course they had was graphic design.
Mm.
And so I thought, let me try and aim for that, right? Very specific thing.
Yeah.
It was kind of like,
Yeah.
you know, aiming for something. Alhamdulillah, I did get it
Inshallah.
eventually. So, focusing. So yeah, those 2 years I did
Yeah.
the A levels and I focused on fine art and graphic design. And so I sort of honed in on the creative side of study, basically.
And then what drove you towards calligraphy itself? What was the...
It came later because,
Oh.
I mean, I grew up with calligraphy here and there. You know,
Yeah.
as
Is it like
Muslims.
within the family? Is it within
Well,
the
no,
family?
there's nothing.
Okay.
No one else is an artist in the family.
Okay.
That's
That's
they're-
interesting.
They're all sort of either an engineer or a
Oh, you were like one of a kind.
The
scientist.
typical. So you're the what do you call it? The black girl. What do you call
The
it?
black sheep.
The black sheep.
black girl. The black sheep. No, yes, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What did your family like
Black
say
camel.
when you... Because your father obviously knew from young that
Yeah,
you were
yeah.
going to pursue arts. What did the rest of the family's reaction? Was there any... Because I know in a lot of different families there's different reactions, there's different expectations. What was yours?
I mean, I don't remember any time anyone pushing back on it. My parents always saw me kind of tinkering with stuff, right? So I was
Okay.
either making something, drawing something. You know, I want the toilet roll, I want the
Yeah.
loo roll, I want that box, I want this, and I wanted to
Just-
make stuff all the time, draw
Sure.
stuff. I was making contraptions.
Like
and-
an inventor.
yeah, everyone's been an inventor at one point, isn't it? So I wanted to always be sort of making something, right? And doing something. And so parents couldn't really understand it because they never come across that. They thought, okay, you know, there's sciences, there's sort of
the typical
the typical sort
engineer.
of But the beautiful
Doctor.
thing was, my dad, he said, you know, look, I don't really mind whatever you do, as long as you keep your salah, right, your prayers, and what that essentially meant was it keeps you halal,
Yeah.
right? So as long as you're doing something halal,
Yeah.
I'm good,
Yeah.
right? And you know, and eventually I was doing a lot of stuff on the computer and so
Yeah,
on and so
yeah.
on. So they thought I was just like an IT guy or something
Okay.
for a while.
You never
Right?
dug any-
Yeah. So you know, but they eventually saw that I was actually quite independent.
Mm.
So from 16, I became really independent with my own
Inshallah.
work and having a part-time job and actually earning my own money
Mm.
while I was still studying. And they were like, "Oh, okay, yeah, we don't really have to worry about this
He's
one."
taking care of himself.
Yeah,
you know?
Yeah.
So I mean,
Alhamdulillah.
that shows really how important, like, parents who are very open in that sense, who really see a skill in their children and really like, okay, let's do that. You know,
Yeah.
on the contrary, you have some parents who are more like, nah, don't do that.
Constrictive.
Go back to
Yeah,
the
sometimes-
standard ones.
Sometimes it is the parents that are saying,
Mm.
"Look, I don't really think this
Mm.
is going to give you a secure career."
Yeah, which is true
Yeah.
in some sense.
In some,
Don't you
absolutely,
think?
yeah, absolutely. But also sometimes out of fear,
Mm.
people give up they think this is what my parents are going to think, and so they believe that notion. But you know, the reality is that especially in the West
Yeah.
or certain developed countries, these careers have a higher chance of being successful.
Mm.
Yeah.
I mean, if you work hard, you can make almost anything, right? But there's a higher chance of it. And I can understand back in certain other countries, if you're in the village or if you're in, whatever, these kind of careers will really not get you very far,
far, yeah.
right? But you're not there. You're sort of
Yeah.
in these developed countries
Yeah.
where the arts is actually
Yeah.
funded and celebrated and,
Yeah.
and so on. Obviously, you've got to be careful, but
Yeah.
but generally speaking, you could, make a career out of a lot of
Yeah.
this stuff. So
Mm.
I always tell this to a lot of people who come to me and they ask me a lot, so I'm doing this, but I really have a
Yeah.
passion for this.
Yeah.
I said, look, don't leave your day job,
Day job, yeah.
but do pursue something that you enjoy doing,
Mm.
and you could make. And some people have transitioned over to doing those careers,
Mm.
and it's really good to see.
What have you thought about the risk, not the risk, but the fear of failure? Have you ever had, what's your experience with that? Because I feel like a lot of the audience or a lot of people my age, what they go through is just that fear that should I do this, and if I fail, what are the consequences? We're already at the consequence of failing, which is quite a big
I guess
fear.
that also depends on the expectation of the people around you. I
Mhm.
guess like people expect you to be. So if you're gonna take the risk and do this, it better come out good. You know what I mean? Like,
So was it easier for you in regards to, because your parents didn't give a large expectation of you, they were just happy with you following your salah and pursuing your own career?
Yeah.
Was it easier to...
I think there's some security that comes with knowing that you're your parents are
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
So
of course, yeah.
especially if you're going through the formative years of education,
Yeah.
you know that if you fail in something, you can always fall back on you've got your parents there.
Mm.
So there's that security. But because I became fairly independent and I was already doing
Yeah.
commercial work at an early age, right? So before I was even doing the degree, I was already working in the
Okay.
industry,
Okay.
right? And so I was already making money doing design,
Oh, wow.
and I had that sort of boost of confidence that okay, you know what, I think I can make a career.
I can
out of
actually
it.
make
yeah.
it. Yeah.
That's self-belief.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So in my case, I was already sort of actioning what little I knew, right? So, and so there's one story. So when I was at school, they give you this period where they give you a week or two to go and do work experience,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
So they say, well, you know, you can choose what you want. So a lot of the other kids were saying, okay, I want to work in McDonald's, or I want to work in these kind of random retail shops. They were just concentrating on just doing a random job for that week. But I said, look, can you put me into a design studio or an agency? And the guy said, well, the careers teacher. And he said, well, I'm not sure, but, you know, I'll have a look. You know, nobody really asked for any real jobs.
They just go straight to Macca's, Hungry Jack's.
Yeah, exactly.
KFC.
Right?
They don't have Hungry Jacks, by the way, in the UK.
I know what it is, though. Yeah.
It's called Burger King.
Yeah, what do you have?
Oh, you know what it is?
Yeah, no, Burger King. I mean, we call it Burger King.
Yeah, in Australia we call it Hungry Jack's.
Yeah, no, I know. So
But anyway, let's get back to the topic. So a lot of the students, before I get hungry, a lot of the students would be asking for generic, like just Hungry Jack's. Let's just get over and done with.
Absolutely,
But
yeah. Exactly. I mean, or they wanted to do something maybe they could make money out of, or they could eat freely on the job or whatever, right?
Food's a good motivator.
Yeah, I think we're going to divert into food at one point.
I mean, he's definitely hungry.
But then he came back and he said, look, a few weeks later, I said, look, I've got you a place at this work experience place in London, in Soho. I said, that's brilliant. So I went to the work experience and I had such a good time there. They thought, you know, I was just going to do some sort of faxing and taking calls and
paperwork.
I said, look, no, I'm here to design. They're like, what do you mean you're here to design? I said, look, that's why I chose an agency. And so they said, okay, you know what? Sit in on this client meeting. The client came in. I'm sitting there, little kid, with all these adults, right? And I take a note of the brief. I said, you know what, I can do this. So I go to the picture books. They had picture books at the time. We had to kind of find photography. And then I did a sketch of the advert that I think they wanted for the magazine. And I showed it to them. And they said, oh, this is quite good. Why don't you fax it to the client? So I then faxed it to the client. Came back that the client loved it. And so they said, well, now you can design it. And I don't really know the software. So I had to kind of really, really learn on the job, as it were. But I managed to put it together. And then it was sent again to the client. Client approved it, and it was published the following week. And I was like, "Wow, okay." And
was that your first breakthrough in some sense?
Yeah, that was like a real sort of,
like,
you know,
you're telling yourself, "Oh, I can actually do this."
Yeah, absolutely. It was applying what I thought I was enjoying doing in design into a real job situation, and so that worked great. And then I had a couple of more similar scenarios where I won some competitions and did something similar, and then I thought, you know what, I'm just going to go ahead and apply for a part-time job at a design firm locally to me, just to get a weekend job, right? And they accepted me coming on, and so I was already sort of, while I was studying, I was still doing this part-time job, and that gave me loads of experience in the industry. So,
but at this particular time, when you were working with the agency, the art of calligraphy did not come yet.
No.
So this come later on.
Much later. So I mean, look, I was aware of calligraphy, but I didn't know Arabic at the time. I mean, not to be able to read it just natively in any way, but you appreciated it and you sort of venerated it and you loved it and you think it's absolutely beautiful and it looked very difficult, right? So, but then it came to a point where I was at university, and I was a little bit disillusioned with the way the art world was. And as I was a bit more conservative in my faith and so on, in an art college or an art school, you're sort of really a sore thumb. You stick out because you can't be like everyone else, right?
Do you feel restricted in some way?
It's self-imposed restriction, but
which is good.
Yeah, which is good. Yeah, it's self-imposed, but you do feel restricted because of it, that you could do certain things, but you were also proud in the fact that you stayed in your remit, right? And that helped you sort of guide yourself. And alhamdulillah, I mean, I really appreciated that I stuck to my guns and sort of focused on what was right for me. But I then felt that, you know, the art world was very sort of egotistical. Everything was about them, right? So it's all about the artist and the unmade bed. It's all sort of all about, you know, what the artist was thinking or doing or desired or whatnot. Yeah. And so I really disliked that side of it.
The whole approach.
Yeah, absolutely. And as I felt that the art world, so the art that I wanted to do could have a more spiritual focus.
Okay.
And remove myself a little bit from it, that it could be appreciated for what it is as opposed to about the artist, right? So it's not a mirror. I didn't want to do a mirror of myself, which is a lot of art, you know, in many ways. It's the artist was thinking this and they felt that and they experienced this. But calligraphy doesn't do that. Calligraphy is focused on either the divine or it's focused on the meaning of the piece itself, the wording,
what the client wants, what they're after.
Yeah, exactly. And so it and that's when I started to explore it. And I traveled a few while I was at university. I was traveling a fair bit, and I grew into you know, be really inspired by. In fact, actually, it started with desire to do Bengali calligraphy.
Bengali calligraphy.
Yeah. So I thought, okay, why don't I do it in you know, in Bengali and that be the start. But as I was doing some of this sort of work, I felt that Arabic script came more naturally, or I enjoyed it more, and it kind of connected with my upbringing and the way I came from a more conservative family and so on. But then I realized, you know what, I don't actually have any training, right? What I'm producing or anything I'm doing is really just quite amateurish.
Just from your own.
It's quite amateurish and so on. But it also was born out of one other thing, was that I really felt that there was a significant lack of good quality Islamic art in the world. Okay. Right? And so that if you went out to buy artwork, you had all this sort of like mass-produced plastic kitsch, you know.
Low quality.
Exactly. And that's all you saw everywhere. It was like a clock with a calligraphy on it or something. It was just
the made in China tag at the back.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, goodness me. And so I thought, well, why can't, if I were to decorate my own house or my room, then I want beautiful artwork, right? That you know, that reminded me of the divine, right? And that's where the idea of VisualDhikr comes, right? And so I thought, you know, if I can't find it, then I'm going to have to just create it my own. And so that's when that journey began for me.
So when did Egypt come about? So did you so you were working at the time? Were you working full time after you studied?
So I was studying, finished the degree, and then I decided to head off to Egypt. Okay. Right?
That was a leap of faith.
Yeah, I mean, sort of. I mean, it was kind of building up to it. There was other things happening. My friend circles were already into sort of planning to go abroad and study Arabic and Islamic studies and stuff like that. And so my immediate friends are already sort of on that sort of tangent. And I thought, you know what, this is the prime time to go and find calligraphers, teachers in Egypt, and also Arabic language, and I can learn Arabic language. And some of my closest friends are going to be there. So we're going to just go as a bunch of guys.
Were these friends from your university? Or
actually, none of them were from my university. Yeah, so I was probably one of the 2 or 3 people in the university that were Muslim, or even, or, you know, there was another university nearby called SOAS, or School of Oriental and African Studies, and there was a lot more Muslims there. So I used to go and hang out there, right, and pray Jum'ah there and stuff like that, right? Because there was no other place nearby, and so that's when I met, you know, a cousin of mine was there, but also a bunch of new friends, and that became really close knit. Some of them were a little bit more advanced, but I really reveled in the study of Orientalism, in study about history and geopolitics and so on. And so this friend circle had that, and we really sort of, we became activists as well. And you know, remember, you have to understand, this was sort of post 9/11, Iraq war came in and so on, and so we were all sort of, you know, working in that sort of realm.
You all became like an ambassador in some way, you know, to promote it. And
so we so it was a completely different circle than
Okay.
what I would have at art college, right? And I was more into sort of Islamic art, Islamic art history, Islamic history,
Yes.
sort of geopolitics and so on
Yes.
at the time. So that was a lot more fascinating to me.
Yeah.
And so moving to Egypt wasn't a difficult thing.
So why Egypt?
I wanted to go Turkey
Okay.
because they had the best master calligraphers in the world,
okay.
in my opinion. But I also wanted to learn Arabic. So I'm like, well, Egypt
That's
makes more sense.
you
You know, in that
I think
sense.
two birds with one stone.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And since my friends were going there,
Yeah.
a few of them were going to Al-Azhar anyway.
Yeah.
So, okay, but let me just go to Egypt. And I went there, but it wasn't easy to find
Mm.
the calligraphers that I
Okay.
wanted to study with.
Yeah.
Right?
So it wasn't like an institution or a university that you go to in Egypt.
Yeah,
Or was
so
it-
there wasn't, at the time I was there wasn't a formal institution. There was previously, years back. However, when I was there, it was already either closed or not operating.
Okay.
But there were some famous calligraphers that were already, they had their own studios and they were teaching,
Yeah.
they were still teaching. And
Sort
so,
of privatized.
yeah, it was privatized. Yeah, I mean, it's a private affair. It's not,
Okay.
there's no sort of, at the time anyway,
Mm.
there wasn't a sort of national institute. There was one that sounded like a national sort of calligraphy school.
Yeah.
But really what it was that it was initially a school,
Mm.
but it ended up becoming just a little classroom in a sort of secondary school
Okay.
that they
Ah.
would then use to teach once or
Calligraphy.
twice a week or something like that.
Yeah.
Right? And
And
so
what year was this when you moved to Egypt?
2005.
2000. It's
Right.
about the same time that I went for a visit
Right.
to
okay.
Egypt.
you guys-
Yeah,
you guys
yeah.
run across
Maybe
each
I
other?
met you. You know?
Maybe.
Oh.
Oh wow, yeah. So yeah, and I went in 2005, and yeah, and so I managed to find a calligrapher, but he was one of the most well-known calligraphers in
Okay.
Egypt as well. So Musab Khudayd Bursaidi, his name is, and studied with him. Also studied with his student, and then there's one
Okay.
other teacher as well who I learned another script style.
How intense was it learning calligraphy?
It's a
In Egypt.
slow process.
It's a slow process.
It's a very slow.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
On the contrary, I thought it was going to be like really hectic.
Oh no,
Like-
no! It's just a lot of it's a lot of practice. That's what it is,
Okay.
right? So when you do meet the teacher, he'll just gonna mark it all red, like no, this is all wrong. Everything is all wrong, right? You know, and then he'll
That's
show
like
you-
your teachers, Simon.
Yeah. But because I failed a lot of my classes, not because of any other reason.
There's different reason.
yeah. So yeah, they sort of mark it up, and then you've got to go back, and so you do more and go show it, and so there's a lot of back and forth,
Okay.
and it takes actually years to actually master, right?
Okay, to get proficient.
Proficient, yeah. And but then you can do it sort of through email or scan it and send it. And
Oh, you can do
Yeah.
that. You can work from home.
yeah, you can do that. And so I think things got picked up a bit.
But was it like a structured pattern of learning, or
There-
was it more like do that and then I will judge how you are?
Yeah.
Oh no, there is
Yeah.
some structure to it. Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. So I mean, it starts with, first you have to train how to even have a pen and,
Okay.
and cut, prepare it, and how you prepare the inks and
Yeah.
all the equipment.
Sure.
And then you start with actual individual letter forms, right? And getting practice with just getting used to the pen, and
Okay.
each letter form is you
Mm.
practice it, and the more you practice the letter forms, then you sort of get used to the nature of the script itself,
Okay.
and the way the angle of the pen and then the sharpness of it and so on. Ultimately, then you start doing very short kind of combination words, and then
Okay.
longer pieces, and slowly over time you do much bigger compositions.
Mm.
But it does take a while to get there. Some people get there quicker. Some people are a little bit more,
Yeah.
a little bit better at it,
Mm.
and other people are not.
It did take me a while myself from primary school to get my pen license. And I can't really relate on a deep level, but
Yeah.
Well, one thing that I really wanted to point out is, I mean, I know it's going on a tangent a bit. I mean, obviously, Ruh Al-Alam, you're from Britain, you're from UK, and
That's right.
obviously you have a nice British accent. I think like Imran, kind of like your Australian accent.
alrighty, mate. So, as we were saying, yeah, you have a little bit of a nice, strong British accent. I've got to say that. But
Is it your best Australian
oh,
accent?
it's not really. I have to
Be
really
natural.
force it through. And when it comes out naturally, that's when it's like I feel a lot more aligned.
Oh yeah, no, I've heard you speak like proper Australian
Yeah.
accent. I'm like, really, is that Imran?
Yeah, like when I'm walking across like Dubai Mall, and I want to emphasize like
I'm from
how
Australia.
unique I am, you know, that Aussie accent comes out, you know,
I
especially.
can see.
But your accent is actually quite neutral.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Yeah.
as I said, I'm going on a tangent here.
yeah.
Yeah, so your accent is really.
That's because I've probably lived abroad a few times. So
yeah.
what happens is over time you tend to sort of lose some of your accent and you adopt other bits. I
Okay.
remember when I was in Egypt, I started adopting a lot of weird. There was a bunch of American guys I used to hang out with, and so
Mhm.
them, and then there's local dialects, and you're speaking in a different language as well.
Okay.
Oh wow.
And so then I had a really weird Mongol. I don't know. It was just a really funny sounding accent. So I came back to the UK.
Who are you?
and I was like,
Where do you go?
Your accent's so weird, and I'm like, oh gosh, I have to then consciously try and focus on my
Yeah.
accent and just
Yeah.
neutralize it or bring it back to something that I
So-
recognize as me. It's
English wash yourself, you know, just
Yeah,
just reteach.
it's weird. The more
Yeah.
again, the more you travel and live somewhere for longer,
Yeah.
the more your accent
Yeah, it changes.
influences and changes.
I guess
and
it,
so on.
it really changes. I mean, my
Yeah.
accent, I had a really thick Malaysian accent before.
Oh.
Because I lived after I got married, living in Australia, like my definitely has changed, you know?
Yeah, I can
Yeah.
see some of the hint of Malay,
Yeah.
comes through here and there.
Oh, I remember the
Yeah.
start. The start was. It was impressive. It was impressive. You
Yeah.
catch
All
every
right,
third
guys.
word. No,
So let's change the topic. Let's go back to Egypt. So,
I'm gonna piggyback off his tangent.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go on another one. Now, in where you're from, London, I've heard just because in Melbourne we have like suburbs. Obviously, there we have different suburbs,
Yeah.
and every different suburb you have, I've heard there's a different accent that goes along with
really?
it.
Yeah, there is actually. Yeah, you're right. So look, there's a generic London accent. It's referred to as estuary sort of accent, but it's generally sort of south of England, right? And there's slightly more heightened variations of it. So what people think is an English accent is not what it really is. Often you get caricatures of different accents. So so a lot of the Hollywood and sort of other places, they sort of focus on an accent and everyone thinks that's the accent. But no,
Okay.
you're right. There are actually variations. So there's sort of the famous Cockney accent.
Mhm.
But Cockney rhyme is different from the Cockney accent. Cockney rhyme is a sort of certain vocab that they have.
Okay.
Okay.
Cockney accent is sort of part of East London, and it sort of moved towards Essex now
Okay.
in a big way. What we have in London is a mix of Caribbean influence
Uh-huh. Okay.
with Asian influence. So you can actually speak to someone and you can tell if they have a South Asian mix in their accent,
Mm.
or if there's a sort of a Jamaican.
Where did
accent.
the Scouse accent come from? We talked about this before, but where was that?
I mean, I don't know. Liverpool's always been a place like East London in the sense that there's always been people coming through. There's a port in Liverpool,
Okay.
and there's a significant Irish community that came from Ireland as well. So the thing in England is that there are loads of areas and loads of cities that actually have very unique accents. So Liverpool Scouse accent, you've got the Brummie accent,
Okay.
the Geordie in Newcastle, you've got
Wow.
Yorkshire accent.
Does Britain have like their own unique translator app that you got to walk around with?
No,
or like
generally speaking, most
It's a
people.
really good app to make.
business.
You need it. Yeah,
Any
no,
viewers, make sure you give us a pattern, include us.
I think there was a thing where there was. I remember someone had a strong Scottish accent or something,
Yeah.
and I think it was Siri or something that couldn't.
Couldn't-
understand.
Wait, is that the elevator one? Where they're in an elevator
Yes.
and they're like elevator operated, you just gotta tell them what floor you want to.
Yeah, yeah.
And there's three Scottish guys that are trying to speak to the elevator,
That's right.
and they don't get it. The elevator's stuck and not moving.
We went
I'll
on
let my
we-
tangent go. I'm
we
very
went on a
interested in
tangent.
Yeah.
So let's go
Deep
back
dive.
slightly bit. We will just touch a bit more on your life in Egypt. So how long were you studying in Egypt in totality? Did you take a break or was it like
Yeah.
a full on? Yeah.
No, so I stayed. Initially, it was for a couple of years, for 2
Yeah.
years, but then it was sort of I came back and forth several times, almost every year, to Egypt for many years.
Yeah.
But I had moved back formally back
Yeah.
to the UK,
Mm.
and I wanted to continue sort of practicing the calligraphy, but then I also wanted to develop my own thing altogether.
Okay.
And so what helped with Egypt and studying the calligraphy there was that I had a really strong foundation in the traditional scripts.
Okay.
But my desire wasn't to stick to the traditional scripts. My desire was actually to focus on developing my own scripts
Okay.
and my own styles and my own way of doing new and fresh Arabic calligraphy, particularly because it came from that same issue with Islamic art, that there wasn't a lot of it, and
It wasn't unique.
it wasn't unique enough or fresh enough, or the way I wanted to see new things happen. And
Do
so
you say that it's too traditional? Would you say
no,
that? Yeah.
there's traditional art
It's
will always
great.
stay there, and it's brilliant. It's absolutely, it has its place,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Mm.
But at the same time, as sort of we're growing up sort of as modern
Yeah,
kind of
yeah. 21st century.
Muslims,
Mm.
we're sort of traveling the world,
Yeah.
where we're sort of learning about Islamic history on a whole new, fresh level.
Yeah.
A lot of us sort of rediscovering our faith in a new way.
Yeah.
You then want to change your lifestyle in every way possible
Mm.
to have an Islamic aesthetic,
Yeah.
Yeah.
right? And one of those things is art, right?
Mhm.
And so I wanted that Islamic aesthetic. So it's not, you can have a beautifully interior decorated, home
Yeah.
where you might, bring in beautiful artifacts from around the Muslim world to
Yeah.
just remind you of the heritage and legacy that we have.
Mm.
And art plays one of those roles
Yeah.
where it comes in and it sort of reminds you of Allah, of
Yeah.
Prophet and our tradition, basically. And so
Kalam.
So you said it started for yourself. Like you started with your own house.
it was for me. It was for me.
you.
It was for me.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And there wasn't an intention to like, I'm going to now show it to everybody and sell it and so
Yeah.
on. But quite quickly, I realized that people were saying, "Oh, well, yeah, this is very
They're
different."
appreciating
Yeah.
your work. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I thought,
Yeah.
let me put it out there, and then what it might do, it might inspire others.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so to probably do something similar or more or whatever.
Like evolution.
Yeah.
Like take another step forward.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I also wanted to, it was also from an angle where I thought, well, if I can prove that Islam isn't this old,
Mm.
ancient, old-fashioned religion
Yeah.
that,
Which is definitely not.
no, it's not.
Yeah,
Exactly.
it's not. Yeah.
So we're sort
Yeah.
of, I'm like, what? This is such a modern religion,
Yeah.
right? How do I represent it as a
Yeah.
modern thing? So one way is to bring, do it through design and art. And so if the religion is represented in a way that looks so fresh and new and modern, then in an indirect way, then I could do that. Let me try and do that. And so that was a major motivation, a personal motivation.
Yeah.
That was my da'wah, as it were.
Yeah.
It changes perspective. It adds
Oh.
perspective.
Absolutely.
Oh.
Uh-huh.
Very nice. So before we moving on, because we have a lot to cover. So before we moving on, I do have one question though.
Oh,
It's your name. It's a
Okay.
very interesting name. I've never encountered this name before.
Even saying
Ruh
it.
Al-Alam. I mean, does it mean spirit of the?
It's satisfying just
It
to
means,
say.
yeah. It's my grandfather who named
mashallah.
named me, and so my dad had gave me a name originally, and then
Hmm.
he spoke to my grandfather, his father, and then he said, "Look,
Hmm.
no, call him Ruh, right, or Ruh Al-Alam, right?"
Hmm.
So it was a
So
bit-
you have to have that Arabic kind of like thing to alam.
otherwise it means something else.
Alam, yes. Okay.
So
Alam.
alam is pain,
Pain.
right?
Yeah, alam. Yeah,
Alam
yes.
is the world, right? So
You don't want to say
So let-
spirit of the pain.
Guys.
yeah,
Not spirit of the pain. I'm sorry.
that's right. So yeah, but it's quite a flamboyant name.
It is, but it's
No.
very
Yeah.
beautiful name.
And it
It's a
suits.
beautiful name. It suits you.
Does suit you.
Suits you, mashallah. You're definitely a Ruh Al-Alam, mashallah. So before we go on to more very deep or history about calligraphy, we just wanted to do a quick rapid fire round with you.
Yeah.
Are you ready?
Bismillah.
I don't know.
I'm ready.
Tea or coffee?
Coffee.
Coffee. Oh, that's
You,
strange.
you
That
can
came from
expand.
that-
You can expand on it a
Yeah, I
little
will,
bit. though.
but
You know, I swing
English.
back and forth between both.
Okay.
Right? I have like weeks just coffee and then weeks tea.
so where would your loyalties lie? Like where is your you rep it? Tea? See.
It goes back to tea.
Always go back to tea.
Yeah.
Okay, it's something that it's your basis, and then
Yeah,
coffee.
that's right.
Your basis.
That's right.
Awesome. All right. Brush or pen? Like a paintbrush or pen?
Pen.
Pen. Why would you say that?
It's just I can do a lot more with a pen, right? and be a lot more accurate with
More
a lot of
Uh-huh.
with the way I would draw or whatever.
Okay.
Especially even in calligraphy, pen would be a
Yeah,
better option.
yeah. Because I think brush is not a common thing in calligraphy.
Okay.
That's the reality of it.
Okay.
It's actually traditionally pen, because calligraphy is very accurate. It's all about accuracy. It's like a font. You've got to.
Yeah.
It's almost like drawing, and so you've got to be fairly accurate and proportional and so on.
Sure.
Whereas with brush, it's not traditionally done. So
Yeah.
doing things on canvas is actually a more recent.
Okay.
Ah.
Okay. It's a thing.
So let's say you're
change.
using your brush, using the pen to do calligraphy. Would you rather do calligraphy while sitting upon a mountain, or would you rather do it on the beach with the waves just hitting you? Just
Neither.
Both.
the way you made it sound.
Beach probably.
Beach.
Yeah.
Why
Look
is
at the
that?
sound of the waves.
Do you know what it is? On the top of a mountain, it's really windy. You can't keep the paper down.
Yeah.
Right.
True.
You know.
It's a
But
logical
even
response.
on the beach, if you put the beach, you put the
could,
paper
yeah.
on in the water, the waves are
Because
gonna
then you got the sand, and so then you know.
Okay, let's say you can
Neither
take some
place-
equipment with you. You could take like a rock to put on top of the paper, just to hold it still. What are we going with?
Yeah, mountain is good as well. Yeah, it's very difficult, that one, because
Yeah, we ask very difficult questions.
it's
Yeah.
difficult. That's
It'll
a
make you
difficult one. Both are good. The mountain's a lot more spiritual, I suppose.
Yeah.
It really sort of grounds you in thinking, you know what, I'm this big.
Yeah. Beach, I think I see it more of it's more peaceful in a sense, whereas you feel the waves like sort of washing away a lot of
think it's very
thoughts,
subjective,
etc.
though.
Yeah.
But mountains, you realize your insignificance in a sense.
Yeah.
Yes, true.
That makes it better. All right, now you knew we were going to jump to a topic of food, so let's just jump into it.
The best topic.
Now we're going to go like shawarma, or we're going to go falafel?
Shawarma.
Shawarma. Okay. Meat.
Yeah.
Is the shawarma in the UK better or?
Oh.
UAE?
Ooh, it does depend where you go, I suppose. I don't actually have that much shawarma, actually.
Remember, we're in the UAE when you give this like. Oh, he didn't answer because.
Yeah.
No, in the UAE, it's good though. I think there are a couple of places I like, especially, and they do good shawarma.
Do good
That's
shawarma.
all, yeah.
Okay.
We're
Fair
safe.
enough.
We're safe. How
Fair
about karak? Karak?
Karak is good.
Ooh, yeah, that's one of my favorite things.
Karak is better here than in the UK.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, nothing beats GCC.
Yeah,
Karak.
the Karak is actually brilliant.
We're actually working on getting a sponsorship. I don't know about like everybody
So
else, but
whoever take the Karak shops.
I'm working on a sponsorship. So yeah, I'll leave my contact number somewhere. You guys just let me know. I got a little excited. Sorry. We'll jump into the next one before I get hypnotized by the thought of karak. I've been fasting for a little while. So, city life or the countryside.
I used to be all about city life, but now, country life.
So
Sure.
like a farmhouse rather than like an apartment. Is that
Yeah.
the
Yeah, I mean, definitely. You want some of that quiet, not surrounded by loads of people,
Yeah.
or noises of construction
Traffic.
and traffic
Yeah.
and beeping and whatnot.
Sure.
But growing up in London, it was all very busy. But then moving outside of London, I realized that
I'm guessing as also when you start a family as well.
yeah,
You
absolutely,
you would like that.
yeah, definitely.
Beautiful. All right. Pizza or burgers? I'm still on the food
Sorry?
subject. Pizza or burgers?
Burgers,
Burgers,
yeah,
100%.
smash burgers in particular.
What's a smash burger?
They smash.
They smash the burger.
meat.
They take the burger and they
Yeah,
smash it.
smash it. Yeah.
What's the point? I'll smash it
Oh.
myself
Oh
when
my
I
God.
bite it. Like,
now,
like,
now the real debate coming in.
yeah, like
No, it's good. I like it. It's sort of, yeah, it's really nice. I
like they make the burger nice and like level. Everything is pristine. Bun, meat, cheese, lettuce, tomatoes,
No,
sauce.
I think they only
bun,
smashed
and
the
it just
actual
no,
beef.
they smash the meat.
Oh, they smashed it. See, this is. I got lost in translation there. Sorry, I'm very passionate when it comes to food. I got okay, so they just smashed the
You
meat.
gotta try it. Honestly, it's
Oh,
really good.
I'm gonna take your word for it.
Yeah,
I'm gonna break my fast with it after some dates. All right, sunrise or sunset?
sunset,
Sunset.
absolutely.
I'll go. Okay, interesting. I'd go sunrise for some reason. I like the awakening of the day, like the start of the day gets you energetic. But what's
Yeah,
the?
no, I did a sunrise on Mount Sinai.
Oh,
You climb up
mashallah.
before the sunrise, and at the top, and the sun's coming up. It's amazing.
That must have been a hike and a half.
It was good. It wasn't that bad actually. It wasn't that bad. I can't
Mm.
remember how long it took, but I've done it a couple of times. It was really nice. Yeah.
It wasn't about the journey; it was about the goal.
Yeah,
got
yeah.
there.
It's really good.
All right. Now you have a background in digital
Illustration.
digital illustration.
Calligraphy,
So would you say traditional or digital calligraphy? Now with your art, you do a combination.
That's
like I
right,
know.
that's
So
right.
which one do you lean in more towards?
So I champion digital calligraphy a lot
Okay.
because I feel that we're in that place now
Transition.
where you've got tablets, screens, and digital pens and so on
Mm.
that allow you to do a lot of the traditional style work, but then also enhance it in ways that we couldn't do on paper, and sort of embellish things and try new effects and all sorts of new stuff.
Is a big aspect of it also to show the evolution of we can change it, we can bring it forward in time, modernize it in a
That's
sense.
right.
Again, to get that perspective of
Yeah,
calligraphy
In the
is
21st century.
in the
yeah.
21st century.
yeah, absolutely. It's not to say that traditional is outdated
Yeah,
at all.
Of course, yeah.
Rather, it's that this is just another way it's evolved, and
Another way that it can be done.
absolutely. And it's art and design and technology, if you will always evolve. Things will move on. People will argue the horse and cart was one thing, then the cars and whatnot. But things move on.
Yeah.
Traditional art and traditional calligraphy will always remain and should always be a practice, right? Yeah.
Like seeing back in the timeline, because I did a little bit of research and I saw that everything was handwritten. Everything up until the 1400s when the WordPress was invented, it was handwritten. All the knowledge, all the books.
You've been really reading, haven't you?
Yeah, I had to do some research.
Mashallah.
I'm gonna master, I'm gonna express a little.
You're feeling the pressure now.
There you go.
But everything was handwritten. And something that really spoke to me when they said everything was handwritten up to the 1400s was it was the calligraphers, these writers' jobs to make sure knowledge was passed down, to make sure everything persevered through time.
We had the Muslim Ummah had a different experience with the printing press. So you have to understand the printing press mechanized, what they call movable type.
Okay.
So you had, sort of, you can take Latin alphabet and you can sort of put it into individual letters and swap out letters and so on.
Yeah.
But with Arabic, we had a cursive script that changed variations based on every type of word.
Combination.
Okay.
Exactly. And so there was an apprehension, a natural one, and a very, normal one, expected one, that you can't just use this technology.
Okay.
There's also a fear of too
Mistake.
much knowledge in everybody's hands.
Okay.
And so there was an apprehension about that as well, because
This is during the printing press kind of like.
Yeah, so
revolution.
different countries and civilizations had the same issue where they felt that, if the layman had access to all knowledge or books, that they would interpret stuff, and then you have chaos and havoc, right?
Yeah.
So naturally that was an apprehension, but from an Arabic point of view, from the way the beautification of a book or a written form, nothing could beat the handwritten manuscripts and the mushafs and so on.
Yeah.
And so there was it took a long time, and even when it first came about and movable type in Arabic, it was broken. It didn't look right.
We
and
didn't adopt it.
It lost the elegance of Arabic script, right? And so that and even till now, you still can't, even in fonts, for example, while you can replicate script, it cannot mimic what a calligrapher would do.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right. And so
The stroke of a
And
calligrapher.
piggybacking off that, like if you look at the way that, let's say, motivational quotes, a lot of different quotes, a lot of different ways things are written, they don't hold much strength or power until, like, if you see it written very beautifully, like in a calligraphic manner. When you see that, it changes the whole approach towards it, more motivational or more insightful, more wisdom in what's written, because the way it's written. What sort of psychologically? What
And
energy?
also to expand on that, can you also touch on what was the point of calligraphy? Was to really, I mean, you can just write normally. Why calligraphy, and what was the point of it? And some background of actual history of calligraphy, if you can.
Yeah, so a lot of calligraphy around the world is beautification of the text, whatever that text is. Often it's text that's venerated, and there's emotion behind the one who writes it, and so they want to somehow express those sentiments through the script somehow. With Arabic calligraphy, it emerged out of Islam. So you had the Quran,
The Quran.
and the Quran was being written down after the Prophet, and then it was on sort of different types of different animal skins and bone and whatnot. Yeah, and then they began to compile, and they wrote it in the first script was Hijazi script, and this sort of Hijazi script didn't have the dots and vowel marks and so on, but it was a sort of angular script that sort of leant backwards a little bit. That was the first kind of script form, written form. But as Islam spread, you had newer regions that became Muslim. So you had Baghdad and modern day Iraq, and these kind of areas where there was again the center of control and rulership started to go around Baghdad and so on. There was a significant more learning and growth in knowledge and and writing down, and they developed many more scripts. And you have Kufi from Kufa, and many other scripts came along. And there was one prominent individual, a vizier in Baghdad called Ibn Muqla, and he kind of codified sort of a proportional aesthetic that applied to some of the existing scripts. So there was a understanding of how it should be written, and certain rules should be followed, and so on. But
the structure,
absolutely. And then even more further forward in large parts of Persia, so you start getting newer scripts. Andalusia and Spain, and so you had Eastern Kufic and Western Kufic.
So he created a sort of foundation for whatever came after.
Or is it considered canonized?
He canonized a lot of the scripts. Some of the kind of the 6 famous scripts that were there at the time. But then other scripts developed based on, again, as Islam spread and into different parts. And so the Ottomans, they added to the tradition, the Persians. So almost every nation or area of the world, there are significant Muslims, there's been a script associated. Even in Malaysia, they have a script. In Indonesia, they actually have a script that's local to them, that's an Arabic script. And so
Jawi,
Jawi, that's right, exactly. And so that's the beauty of how, I mean, you got Sini script, Chinese, Arabic, Sini script. So it evolved, but it took on a local flavor, just like the masajid and the mosques. They sort of took on a local architecture. And so you could tell a Turkish mosque from a Moroccan mosque to
just by their calligraphy.
Calligraphy, and so on. So this is the beauty of how Islam adopted local cultural aesthetics, but didn't wash it away. And
it's like the culmination of it all, rather than
absolutely. It's just a beautiful tradition, and so that's how Arabic developed into Arabic script, and Arabic calligraphy developed into a sort of a very beautiful, elaborate
art form.
I mean, it's definitely. I mean, when you look at the calligraphy, you can see that it's that's beautiful. But what really distinguish between, I mean, someone who has experience in it, between that's a really good calligraphy, and wow, that is an extraordinary calligraphy. How would you know? Because if I were to look at the two, I'd be like, okay, they look good, but they look kind of similar. So how would you actually identify?
Like if you were a teacher,
as
how would you grade it?
Is it the red pen or?
Look, calligraphers, when they see other calligraphers' work, there's a level of understanding and appreciation. The average non-calligrapher, unless they've been around a lot of work or whatever, they may or may not be able to tell what's really good and what's not so good, or where the issues are or problems are. And so it is a problem actually, because sometimes people can't tell what's bad calligraphy and what's good. And there's also the aspect of calligraphy where people don't actually read it. And when you're not able to read it, or when it's just abstract, I understand that's a separate thing, but when it's meant to read something and you don't actually read it, and then you don't appreciate what it actually is meant to say or be, then it sort of loses its purpose to a degree. So there's art form. So calligraphy was used decoratively in the past, but it always read something.
It's off content, even the actual wording.
So if you look at the Dome of the Rock, the Qubat al-Sakhra, and if you look at there are specific verses that actually, I mean, it's beautiful and it looks decorative, but actually has a lot of contextual narrative to where it is, and the audience in Jerusalem, in Al-Quds, right? So there's a very poignant message in the actual script of the specific verses that's been picked out.
Mm.
But if you don't know that, you don't appreciate it
Yeah.
fully.
Yeah, you can just, I mean, you can appreciate the
beauty
lines.
of it. But if you read
But
it,
there's
then
no-
you think, oh, there's a different layer completely.
Inshallah.
And so, for a lot of calligraphers, it's
Yeah.
really important that the intention is to actually understand what it says,
Yeah.
right? To then appreciate what it is.
So it's more than just lines.
No,
It's
absolutely,
really
yeah.
it's the story behind it. What are you trying to really relate to
Absolutely.
a reader?
But there is a place for people who just do abstract calligraphy.
Okay.
And
Just, yeah.
Subjective.
yeah, letter form and just
Yeah.
what the hurufiyat or
Okay.
kind of letter art and stuff like that. There's nothing
Mm.
wrong with that.
Mm.
But I say the more you look at it, the more you can
Mm.
search it out and look at
Yeah.
artists' work and
Yeah.
so on, the more you'll get a knack for understanding what is good,
Mm.
and well-written calligraphy and so on.
So you were talking just now about the different types of script, and you have Ijazi, Kufic. I'm sure there's a long list of it. What is your go-to?
I
would you-
suppose the
Are these all traditional?
a lot of these are traditional scripts. So, the famous ones that you might see everywhere is thuluth,
Thuluth,
right?
yeah.
Thuluth Jali,
Nasakh.
Nasakh,
Yeah, Nasakh.
absolutely.
Mm.
You see Thuluth, Nasakh, you see Diwani a lot.
Mm.
Raqa you see everywhere, and Kufik is the kind of the
Yeah.
square form.
Yeah.
You see that a lot, but there are many other scripts, and
Mm.
there are other scripts that were developed, and they are so flamboyant. Some of them,
Yeah.
some of them Andalusi Maghribi scripts are amazing,
Wow.
amazing. It's some scripts fell out of favor
Yeah.
over time, and then scripts also held different types
Mm.
of
Mm.
roles,
Yeah.
right? So some of the in Diwani would be used for sort of very decorative titles and so
Okay.
on,
Mm.
and Thuluth as well. But then they'd write the actual
Mm.
document in Nasakh, for example,
Okay.
and then you got the handwritten kind of more everyday
Yeah.
script, which is Raqa and so
Mm.
on. So these are the traditional scripts,
Okay.
or the traditional scripts that people tend to learn. But I create my own scripts,
Yeah.
and so I want to introduce new styles
Inshallah.
of my own, and I kind of
We should definitely we will be touching a lot on that on the next two topics. But I just really want to touch on the next topic, which is really the connection that you have between what you do, which is calligraphy, and your connection to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I think this is really the main contention or the main idea of the Kalam Space podcast, which is really to make a connection between the two. And as we understand, as a base level understanding of calligraphy, it has a link to Quran, in a sense of how Quran was written in a form of calligraphy.
That's right.
So how do you, as an experienced calligrapher, how do you find that connection to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through what you do?
Yeah. So look, Arabic calligraphy for Muslims around the world has a spiritual aesthetic to it, simply because it's the language of the Quran, right? And to the point that some people won't mistreat even just random Arabic, that's secular
Yeah.
Arabic, whether because of the veneration of it. And there's a beauty in that. There's a sort of love, natural love in that.
Yes.
And so it was a way for me to get closer to Allah and tradition by knowing the script. And so there's a responsibility. The Turks actually do this thing where some calligraphers would actually do wudu
Okay.
before they would even begin writing,
Inshallah.
calligraphy, and because they were also writing verses of the Quran,
Yes.
so you can understand. So there was a whole process and approach to the calligraphy,
Yeah.
and so for Muslims, there's an instant.
How the Turkish used to make wudu before they write their calligraphy, because it pertains to the Quranic verses.
Like a form of ibadah. Like
Yeah, absolutely. It's taken very seriously by the Turks,
Mm.
and maybe beyond the Turks as well, where
Yeah.
they would do wudu, they would
Inshallah.
prepare everything. They would even prepare the ink from the soot from the lamps of the mosque,
Uh-huh.
right? So they would take the soot from the lamps,
Lamp
the oil
to the
lamps,
mosque, yeah.
and then ground it down and prepare it and make it into ink, and then they would use that to write the script. I mean,
Inshallah.
that is.
that's something else. There's a level of veneration and
Yeah.
respect to
Yeah.
the tradition is unbelievable.
Yeah. And I see even that there's definitely direct correlation, but also there's indirect one as well, in terms of you gain qualities such as discipline,
Patience.
Yes.
discipline in calligraphy,
100%.
which is very Islamic.
Yes.
So is that something that you got it as well from calligraphy,
no,
in terms of your discipline in your life?
So that's a difficult part
Yeah.
of you really have to learn to
Be patient.
patient, and that was probably one of the hardest things I've had to do, because it takes so much longer to
Yeah.
master it
Mhm.
and get to a good level,
Mm.
and in many ways I still think I'm not good enough in it,
Mhm.
right? And so what I would say, yeah, absolutely, some people find it therapeutic, but it is about, there's almost breathing exercises that people have
Okay.
to go through, and be patient with, and a lot of the times you get upset with yourself and just scrap the thing and think, oh, I've got to start again, or
Yeah.
like, I've messed this up and so on. So things take time,
Mm.
and so you do need to have patience with this
Yeah.
sort of art. I mean, anything you learn,
Yes, of course. Yeah.
any sort of creative endeavor, you've
Yeah.
got to have a sense of patience to do it.
Is there any moment in your life, maybe the time when you were studying, where it became really hard, but in your mind you're like, no, I'm actually doing this for something good, this will benefit me, not just for the world, and it's for my akhirah as well, as I'm doing this. Has this ever occurred to you? Has this ever happened to you?
Yeah, absolutely. There are sort of some works that I do is just purely for the sake of doing some beautification of
Yeah.
something that's linked to the deen in some capacity. And so
Mm.
you whether I would ever sell it or otherwise, that's not the purpose. It's
Yeah.
just to put something out there that is just purely beautiful, and it's sort
Yeah.
of
Can inspire
in
people.
praise. Yeah, exactly. And so that's
And
the idea.
has it helped you with the art of perfection? Because as you said, if you don't do a good job, you're going to be scrumpling that up, throwing it away.
Yeah, yeah.
So whenever you release something, it's almost like it's helped you
It's
set a
never-
standard.
yeah,
like
yeah.
make sure.
You aim for it,
Mm.
but it's never perfect.
Of course,
Right?
Of course not.
And there's nothing ever I put out that's perfect in any way, right? And so I mean, most artists are like this, that they sort of don't like their work, right, after a while, or they never think it's quite right, but they've had to stop at some point, right?
No, it's like you listening to your own self.
Or like
Yeah,
when I
like
take a photo of myself, and I'm like,
and you listen to yourself, like,
you gotta
oh, what do you
criticize.
think? Yeah.
Yeah.
But sometimes you criticize yourself a bit too much. You end up you're actually
Yeah,
quite
become
good
your
at it.
harshest critic.
The idea is to do
Yeah.
it with ihsan, as opposed to
Yes.
make it yani absolutely perfect.
True.
Right? It's the effort of
True.
taking time and doing it properly, as opposed to
Yeah.
making it perfect.
Yeah.
Things are not necessarily going to
Yeah.
be perfect, but the idea is, it's the principle behind
Yeah.
it, the intention, and
I mean,
the process.
definitely all these things that you're saying has really shown in your calligraphy. I've seen some of your
Alrighty, so we just had to take a little impromptu break. We had to get the makeup team to just update a few things, pray Maghrib, of course, and
Yeah.
look pretty
But
for our
that was
audience.
a really nice break, actually. We had a nice Maghrib together. Thank you very much, Brother Ruh Al-Alam,
for leading
for
it.
becoming the Imam. Inshallah, beautiful recitation as well. So you're not just artistic, mashallah, beautiful recitation, and a qari as well, mashallah.
It's going a bit too far there.
Yeah.
There's artists in everything he does.
Mashallah,
Art.
mashallah.
Mashallah.
So just picking up where we left off, just really talking about how you've kind of like, you're very mobile in the sense of you've moved countries, you've lived in different countries as well, and I'm sure your artwork also in the sense follows you as well. And I've seen. I mean, your artwork is just absolutely mesmerizing and beautiful. And I've seen one of your artwork was displayed in the National Museum of Doha.
Yes,
Yes, that was
that's
just
right.
beautiful.
Well, so some of the work, some of the calligraphy actually on several parts of the wall. It's actually a poem by the founder, and it's a sort of a Qatari dialect poem.
Okay.
And they wanted it to be sort of plastered across the walls in different parts of the museum.
Okay.
And so I had the privilege of alhamdulillah writing for
So
it.
where else would we find your work?
I mean, at the moment there's an
Yeah.
exhibition in Vienna,
Vienna.
in Austria.
Okay.
So in the Weltmuseum in Vienna, there's an exhibition on the Quran. It's called the European Quran,
Inshallah.
and how the Quran has an impact in Europe and its tradition in relation to Europe. And so they asked me to do a piece, and so I did an animated piece
Okay.
of Surah Ibrahim, the first verse, Surah Ibrahim, and I animated it. Instead of sort of just having a piece, it kind of takes you through a visual kind of following the
Wow.
camera follows the actual script being formed and written, and then it reveals itself.
Inshallah.
Yeah.
Piggybacking off that, I'm gonna take that, and I'm gonna give. I'm not giving you the opportunity to, but I want you to. Like, it's a request from me to sort of name drop. Like, I want to hear like what are some of the names of the people that you've done work for? Like who off the top of your list that you're very honored to be able to do work for them? Just like you said with the museum.
I mean, look, there are. I wouldn't say there's a whole host of very notable people or anything like that. There's a few private individuals I've done work for that I can't actually name.
Everyone loves that.
But because they like to stay anonymous, and they're very discreet about who they are and what they do, and they've asked for very specific pieces that have been done for them.
They made you sign NDAs and
they didn't really quite ask for that. They just asked for discretion, and it was kind of given that, look, you know, this is for private residents, and for this person and that person. I won't say royalty per se. Sometimes it's just very high net worth individuals who've got very particular taste in art, and or they're connoisseurs of Islamic art, if you will, or collectors. And so it's nice to work on that. And I've worked for like sort of in a more commercial sense for big name brands and whatnot.
Like you said, you work for Netflix in UK. You've done work for them.
That's right. Yeah.
There's a lot of corporations that you've worked with.
Is there like people that you've done work for, even in the recent years, where they might not be very influential, but just someone that you really look up to, where you actually get nervous when you wanted to do a piece, or is it like it's just a work for you, you can do it? No problem.
I mean, look, everything has a different purpose. Every brief or every client is a bit different. It's all some of it's nerve wracking because sometimes it's high profile work, and so everyone's going to see this, so it's going to be plastered. So sometimes it's a small job, but actually because it's out to a lot of people, then it has a lot of visibility. And so you get quite self conscious about doing work that's going to be out there. But then a lot of the times you just don't think about it. It's just work or whatever. But everything has a challenge. I mean,
So when you see your artwork being displayed in this, really amazing places, how do you feel? Do you feel proud, or do you feel like, oh, I've done it? Or do you feel like is it just an humbling experience where you're like, oh, I actually have a lot more to do? So,
what I worry about? I worry about other calligraphers looking at it and thinking that's just that's not good enough, right?
you should have done a little bit more.
Yeah, so I'm very self-conscious about it.
Okay.
I'm embarrassed to sort of point it out a lot of the times, or say that that's my work, or that's this and that, because I'm my biggest critic. But I also assume that everyone else is criticizing it, or having a critical eye at it.
But is that the case in real life? Like, do people actually critique you?
I'm sure they do, because I'm critical. I look at work and I'm like, that could be better, or that could be done, and but maybe not everyone's like me. Everyone's probably just nicer than me when it comes to looking at other people's work. So I don't know. I assume that, and so I get really worried about people.
It's just a natural part of being a calligrapher. You got to like
an artist. Any artist. I would assume is like this, and so I mean, I think you've got to be a little bit, aware that people are going to look at it, and there are going to be people eyes who are going to be your seniors or mentors or others, and who are going to have a more critical look at work. And even when you put out work, I mean, I put out something on Instagram even today, and then I looked at it and I think, hold on a second, maybe I should have tweaked that before I put it out. And so
there's always that self-reflecting.
There's always room to improve, always. And so you've got to be always ready for that. But you can't always wait for perfection. It'll never come, really. So you've just got to put stuff out.
So when you I mean, obviously you've exhibit your work quite in a lot of places globally. How do people from different kind of like background or countries react to your piece? Is there like a specific, like, that for a fact that if I'm going to exhibit my work in this country or in this place, they're going to love it? or on the contrary, I mean, on the opposite side, if I were going to put my work on this place, they're going to like, they're very particular.
And to adjust on that, would you change your style a little bit depending on what country you would go to?
I mean, things have context, so you're right. So sometimes you might do something where it will be appreciated more by the potential type of audience that you might get. However, what happens really is that you won't worry about that no one's going to ever turn up and actually have a look at your work.
It's more like you just looking at your work.
Like, who's this nobody, and no one's gonna really come or look.
But I'm sure
or-
there's never been the case. Like
I don't
that,
know.
yeah.
I mean, like a lot of the times I'm not there in some shows, so
Yeah.
or I'm not there for long enough to wait around. And
Yeah.
I did remember a couple of shows I was at, and like
Mm.
after the launch, it was like really quiet, right? Not just because it wasn't just my show; it was many other. It was shared with
Okay.
other people. But then, you know,
Quiet in a good
quite
way.
like
or-
there's hardly any visitors, right?
Okay.
You know,
Okay.
but that could be down to marketing. It could be down to locality,
Yeah.
timing of the day,
Yeah.
or whatever.
Yeah.
But you then sort of get humbled really quickly. So it's like, you know, crawl back into your
Oh,
hole.
is it just maybe in the field of calligraphy, maybe people are not as like drawn to it?
Yeah, and
Maybe.
that's the thing as
Yeah.
well. I mean, look,
Mm.
the thing about calligraphy is that it's still seen as a craft, right?
Mm.
So it's seen as, you know, sort of decorative illumination,
Yeah.
craft, and so on. And so, whilst we do call it an art form,
Mm.
it's not considered by very much a lot of the sort of Western world as
Yeah.
a form of art per se. It's a historical form of art from a certain culture and a
Yeah.
civilization,
Yeah.
but you're not going to see a lot of exhibitions
Yeah.
in major galleries or museums or anything like that.
Mm.
It probably fits a historical museum
Yeah.
to a degree for them,
Yeah.
but you're not going to see a modern gallery showcase
Yeah.
sort of traditional calligraphy or handwritten calligraphy because it's just seen as a craft. And
Is that what you're trying to change though?
yeah, in many
Yeah,
ways, yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. It's just to look at calligraphy, look at design, in Arabic related design
Yeah.
in a completely different way,
Yeah.
and sort of to do newer things that sort of make it relevant.
Yeah.
But then at the same time, we're not trying to pander to the sentiments of the art world,
Mm.
right? So you've got to really keep yourself in check because you've got to know, okay, well, the art world wants a certain type of work to
Yeah.
be shown and
Yeah. Yeah.
exhibited,
Yeah.
and it doesn't align with your own sentiments or your own.
But does that in any way stop you from
It
pushing?
shouldn't. Yeah, no. So
Yeah.
a lot of people will go through that. A lot of
Yeah.
artists will say, "Well, you know what? I'm trying to get my work in the mainstream. Why isn't it getting in the mainstream?
Yeah,
Why
yeah.
isn't it in these galleries and so
Yeah.
on spaces?" They're not interested in it.
Mm.
That's not their forte. They want to do their own
Mm.
thing, and so there are specialist galleries, specialist
Yeah.
places that will exhibit it, and you have to understand that it went from calligraphy. Even in a normative sense, Western calligraphy isn't
Yeah.
just randomly exhibited in a gallery.
Okay.
It's just not. It's just you
Yeah.
know you'll find it here and there,
But,
but
I think calligraphy it's a bigger thing in the East. I mean, in the Middle
Absolutely.
East.
in the Middle East or in the Muslim world, it is because it's the main sort
Yeah.
of art form that resonates in a lot of countries,
Yeah.
particularly with Muslim countries where sort of figurative work
Yeah.
wasn't developed very much because of Islam,
Yes.
and so therefore calligraphy took center stage in many ways.
Mm.
And then as art and Renaissance and periods came along and the
Mm.
21st century post industrial revolution, art is center stage as a marker of a civilization.
Okay.
And when you're studying art back in the day, how did you battle it? I'm guessing the classrooms must have been quite different.
Very
The
different.
approach would have been much different. How did you go through that whole process? And how would you compare that sort of class to nowadays, the modern art class?
Well, I'm not ancient, so I mean, it's like
That's the thing with Imran though. He's just trying to like really just push us like in a different, like completely different era.
I'm just saying,
Yeah,
you know,
come
I'm just
on,
trying to relate it to my...
yeah, no. So you're right. Look, art hasn't massively changed since when I was studying it, anyway. But just to put that out there,
There's no stone tablets. There's
we
swap that around.
yeah, absolutely. We had to make our own sort of paint.
But I'm more talking towards the crowd of people.
Yeah, no, the crowds are similar in terms of those who are artists in
Okay.
art college and so on. It's still very much similar. There's a diverse range of people of all types of orientation,
Yeah.
and they are producing art. And like I said, it was really a lot of art is about themselves.
Yeah.
Not all of it, but a lot of it's about very ego driven, basically. And so it's like, oh, what does the artist think about this and what they're feeling and what emotions they're going through, and what does it say about the artist's life and reflection, or they went through this trauma, so they did this art piece. Whereas Islamic art isn't about that.
It's not about that. Yeah.
Yeah, and so the focus is on the message or the divine or the Quranic ayah or whatever it might be. And it's not about the artist. So you can look at one piece of calligraphy and another and you won't really know who the artist is, right? And almost not relevant. But modern variations of Islamic art or Arabic calligraphy or Arabic design or anything like that, or Islamic design, has evolved to the point that it's recognizable by artists.
So when you
More
see
so.
that art, you admit, okay, this is the
Yeah, you can
calligrapher.
say, oh, this is a Sha'rani, or this is a so-and-so,
Mhm.
artist, and so on. This is an El Cid, or
Like a modern day Picasso. This
Yeah.
one, this one.
yeah, absolutely. You can tell because there are more unique
Mhm.
styles that have been developed
Mm.
in the last 50, 60 years, where people are sort of coming out with a unique twist on the way they do something.
Yeah.
And likewise, I'm doing the same, but it's not to say, oh, this is my work only or whatever, but it's
Yeah.
to introduce something new
Mm.
and different and fresh and evolve these scripts and move traditions further along. And so that's the desire. That's the sort of the key marker
Sure.
behind what is my motivations. I can't
So
speak for-
just moving on that. So this vision and this this goal that you have in your mind, did this lead up to the creation of your very beautifully named company called VisualDhikr?
Oh, yes.
By itself, it's such a beautiful name, VisualDhikr.
Yeah.
And you have multiple companies. Would you be able to kind of like elaborate a little bit more?
Yeah.
And how did you develop these companies, and what is the main goal of these companies?
So VisualDhikr came about, and that's a very early on. So I
Yeah.
initially used that term to just coin what I was doing,
Okay.
because the intention was, okay, how do I create artwork that's reflective, in the sense of reflecting on the divine
Mm.
and on creation and so on, and that's the dhikr part of it. And so it was an aesthetic or a visual form of it, so
Yeah.
therefore visual dhikr, right?
VisualDhikr.
And so that was my way of saying, look, this is how we can remember, the creator and,
Yes.
and the blessings we have and so on, and then put wherever you look, you have that visual dhikr essentially.
Yeah.
And so I produced a lot of artwork under that sort of brand name, if you will. And then that eventually developed into doing other sort of lifestyle products
Okay.
for Muslims. And so one of them was the prayer mat concept
Okay.
that I launched, and that was a success in its own right.
Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. And then there are other projects I do have. So there's Maktub.
Maktub.
Maktub is so out of the calligraphy, there's a lot of requests for matrimonial calligraphy for couples, for sort of friends and family and so on. But I wanted to sort of make it a kind of a business of its own. And so I came out with Maktub as a project. And so within that, I do my own styles and scripts and so on. You can get traditional scripts done by anybody really, but with my project, it's specific to my scripts and my styles. And so I try to do a different style for every couple or individual,
Okay.
and how their name fits which script better. So I won't just do the script based on what they ask me to do. I'll say, look, actually your name works better as a couple with this particular style,
Yeah.
and I'd recommend that, and
Yeah.
I would do that. So there's a kind of bespoke approach to the
Which is really nice. Like, sometimes you have in your mind like, oh, I want it that way. It's actually not really that nice. I mean,
That's
it's nice to have that, that recommendation from the artist themselves.
Yeah, that's
That's
right.
why he's the master.
MashaAllah.
When
And
a master
there was
recommends
another, there was another company that it's called Archetype. Is that a
Yes.
company or what?
So that's a commercial design agency that I founded in the UK. So obviously I do a lot of traditional work, but then I'm into branding, brand development, digital development, and so on. And so from a commercial sense, I set up that agency, and sort of that's the main business I also run on a day-to-day business basis. Sorry, and then that naturally includes a lot of my calligraphy, Arabic design work, and so on. So we have we've got a specialist niche service where we are able to sort of work in Arabic and work and sort of push the boundaries of Arabic design in a commercial sense, and in branding and so on. And
from my reading, is Archetype is a font developer? Is that what it is?
no, so Archetype is a design agency.
Okay.
And so we do sort of 360 design. So
Okay.
it's from anything from branding to designing apps or websites and so on. But under Archetype, we have released our own typefaces,
Okay.
our own fonts, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's why you might have heard of it.
Yes,
So it's called. Yeah, so the first font that we released was called Shubbak. Shubbak under Archetype, basically the foundry.
Shubbak. What does that mean, Shubbak?
Sort of window opening
Okay.
window. Shubbak.
Mm.
And so we do typefaces
Okay.
under Archetype. That's right.
So that's your own font.
Yeah, that's
So
right.
is that available?
You can buy it online.
Okay.
It's in Arabic and
Okay.
in English and Latin, as we call it. And yeah, you can buy it online. Alhamdulillah, it's been selling well.
It's a good business.
Yeah,
You got trademark font. That's good.
yeah, that's cool. It's really cool. People use it. I do sometimes see it in some places here and
Yeah.
there. Being used by brands, basically.
Any honorable mentions?
I can't.
You like all the honorable mentions.
I can't really remember who's
Yeah.
who's that, but yeah, I know we've been sort of occasionally collecting stuff that we see in the wild. Basically,
Mhm.
that's we did that.
Yeah.
And it feels good, doesn't it? When you see
Yeah.
it, you're like, that's me.
That's right, yeah.
That's it.
I'm sure that there's been cases where you see something and it's something that you've done a long way
Oh.
back. Has there been a case where you're like 50-50, like, is that my work? Or has there been a case like that?
Yeah, no, there
Yeah.
is you do get that. So
Yeah.
I've seen a few products that we've done ages ago.
Mhm.
So I've seen them in the supermarket, and they're still using some of the logos that we've
Wow.
designed in Arabic or in.
What was this by VisualDhikr?
No, this is by Archetype.
By Archetype.
Archetype,
Okay.
yeah. So we'll do like designs for packaging or a business, and so there's like a supermarket chain that we've done in the UAE, in Bahrain and Qatar. And so they're based here as well, and so you see the big sign sometimes driving past, like, yeah, I did that, and it's still there, and and so you do get to see a lot of brands or logos or designs that you've done. Sometimes it's like, oh, it looks dated now.
Yeah. It's the same thing when you see a prayer mat with like the arch. That's what
Yeah.
we do. Technically, when you see a prayer mat with
That's
the arch,
right.
I think we touched on the subject, but he has invented the prayer mat with the
Yes.
arch. Like that is all him.
Yeah.
So if you guys see that around, the
Make dua
proprietor-
for him.
Make dua.
alhamdulillah.
Please.
Alhamdulillah.
Yeah, just wanted to also touch on, so I'm sure that you're a very busy man, you're doing a lot of things, and is there any, for our viewers, is there any events that are coming up that you are in the process of it, or you are part of it, that people can actually maybe meet you, and if they're very interested in calligraphy, maybe they can talk to you about calligraphy, or some exciting events that are coming up?
So there's ones that I can't immediately confirm because they're not confirmed.
Yeah.
But I'm hoping that there's a couple of events coming up in Dubai,
Okay.
and one might be in Sharjah,
Okay.
that around calligraphy or design around Arabic typography.
Okay.
And so you can sort of find out more about it the more I sort of get closer to it on my Instagram or sort of X feed or something. But yeah, there's those things happening. There's also the exhibition in Vienna that's currently on, but that's going to go for a whole year.
Wow.
So it sort of finishes next year in November or October or something. So there's my piece there, but I'm not going to be there very often. So it's going to be probably there probably sometime next year I might visit.
At the same time, do you run any workshops? Or are you planning in the future maybe to run workshops? I would be really interested to learn like basic of calligraphy.
I don't think I'm a good teacher. In all honesty, I've done them in the past. And I don't often do them, unfortunately, because there are other people who do them very well and they're better at it than I am.
Okay.
But I have done them. I've done them in Malaysia once, actually.
Oh, really?
In Kuala Lumpur.
Thank you very much, Mr.
thank you.
Ruh Al-Alam. It was a pleasure having you. I'm sure the viewers enjoyed this episode and have learned a lot. We have definitely learned a lot from you.
Thank you.
And you're such a gentleman. We thoroughly enjoy your presence. And thank you very much.
And we'll make sure we leave the your Instagram, your social media, everything in the description. So if anybody wants to check them out, have a look at his work.
Thank you so much.
Clearly.
Barakallah fikum.
Thank you
Take
very
a look.
much. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Awesome.